we wanted to discuss what's happening in Iran, which everyone obviously is aware of, but we wanted to look at it through the lens of women and girls and what that means, what's happening there, what does it mean for them. First, let me just do a little bit of biography of Naza. She and her mom left Iran in 1998.
Right.
Yeah, when you were 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And you haven't been back.
Unfortunately not, no.
Right, and probably cannot return at this point.
For sure, no.
Right. Why did you leave? Why did you and your mom leave?
You know, it was, what happened after the revolution, it was in small incremental changes that happened quickly, but quite silently. And you started to see the changes unfold as time went past. So by 98, I think, you know, our family had we'd given up hope on what the government was going to do for the country, do for the people, and I think what we're seeing today is a reflection of that.
Right, right. So today, as the announcer said, you're the founder and CEO of the SAGE Foundation. Mm-hmm. Explain what that is.
So we're a small organization, and we focus on funding and supporting grassroots organizations on the ground in the Middle East and Africa. And you know, one of the countries that I've least been able to operate in is Iran, because of logistical and, you know, sanctions and all of that. But yeah, it's an organization that predominantly focuses on development around 3 pillars, which is climate resiliency, women and girls empowerment, and education. Right,
right. So let's talk about the current situation now in Iran. So Gina Mahsa Amini was a Kurdish Iranian woman who was arrested, I believe, in Tehran by the so-called morality police because of improper hijab. First of all, explain about her name, which I found fascinating. We were talking off stage because typically she's referred to as Mahsa Amini, mm-hmm. but her first name really is Gina, right? Correct?
Yeah. So the Islamic Republic forbids the Kurdish community from speaking their own language or doing anything that's cultural to the Kurdish people, or even have Kurdish names, which is why she needs an Iranian name on her passport, which is Mahsa, but her real name is actually Gina.
Right. So we start from that point, and then she's arrested. The Iranian government says that they didn't harm her, but she died in custody, and her family, I think it's fair to say, suspects that, you know, she died as a result of the treatment she received while in custody.
Yes.
That launched the protests that we're seeing today. One of the most striking things about the protests, I think, is, and so far at least 215 protesters have been killed, including 27 children, thousands arrested. These protests are across the country. And one of the things that I found really striking is that it is really women and girls who are leading these protests at this point. Why do you think that is?
It's a fight for their freedom, for their ability to be able to choose, for their ability to be able to make certain decisions about their autonomy, for them to experience, for them to be free.
Right. And does the fact that they're this generation, does that make a difference? Are they approaching this differently than older women, for example, who have lived with the regime longer, you know, haven't had access to social media? Is there a generational issue here?
No, I think this protest is actually quite the contrary. It is transcended ethnic and gendered lines and religious lines in so many respects. It is an entire nation coming together and protesting against the Islamic Republic.
Right. Iranian women are quite well educated, but they only constitute about 16 to 17% of the workforce. The impact of COVID was, as it was for working women all across the world, quite severe in Iran as well. We know the economic situation there is in pretty dire straits, partly because of U.S. and European sanctions. But speak to why, and I should say Naza is in daily contact with people on the ground in Iran tracking what's happening. But speak to why the challenge that women in Iran face to have autonomy, to work, to do what they want.
Look, I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want autonomy? Why wouldn't you want
Right.
to be able to make your own decisions? I mean, in Iran, by law, a woman is worth half a man. Let that resonate. We are worth half a man. So that immediately creates a systemic issue.
Right.
And, for example, as a woman, you mentioned educated women. You go to university, you graduate, you are then put in an environment where these institutionalized patriarchal systems have no space for you. And not only that, it leaks into different parts of society. So the people that are reviewing your university applications, the people that are granting you the jobs, are subconsciously or consciously biased towards you because you're a woman.
Right.
And what the Islamic Republic has failed, and it's the government, what they have failed to understand is by keeping women out of the workforce, you've had a detrimental effect on your economy. By keeping women out of the workforce, you have got an unequal society where gender-based violence is the norm. And if they only ever integrated women equally, or at least in greater numbers, we would have had societal well-being, we would have had diversity, we would have had greater innovation, but that hasn't been the case.
Well, as you say, it's sort of institutionalized, so there doesn't seem much of a chance to create that kind of situation in Iran. Do you think that these protests lead to any reforms or improvement?
I mean, reforms within the Islamic Republic is very rare, specifically because the supreme leader always refers to Gorbachev and the Soviet Union and how his reforms essentially led to the fall of the Soviet Union.
Right.
So I don't see a choice in, I don't see much reforming with the current regime.
Right. A couple of other statistics that I found resonant that I wanted to share. So the World Economic Forum in their 2022 Global Gender Gap Report has Iran among the bottom 5 countries, actually 143 of 146, for gender equality, including equality in the workforce. It just seems extremely difficult for the idea that women are going to be welcomed in any real setting. That does not seem like it's on the horizon, even with these protests.
I am having a difficult time seeing that happen with the current regime in power.
We spoke earlier about the number of people, including women, who have multiple degrees, but there are no jobs, certainly for women, but also in some cases for men. And you made an interesting point. I said the economy is suffering to some great degree because of U.S. sanctions and European sanctions. But you had an interesting point about choices made by the regime.
Yeah, there's no doubt that these sanctions have had considerable harm on the Iranian economy. There's no doubt about that. Inflation's at an all-time high. Our currency's devalued by 70-80%, and it has had an impact. However, I want to think about the sanctions in a different context. If you are, as a leader, or as the people running the country, if you have a responsibility towards the people, how are you investing the very little resources and tools at your disposal in investing in external forces within the region that are destabilizing the entire Middle East? So they're not even, it's not like they're even, with the limited sanctions, they're pouring that money back into our economy. They're not. And this is why the average civilian is suffering in Iran.
One of our audience members asked a question which I think flows naturally from this, which is, what do these protests in Iran mean for women in the Middle East more broadly? How significant are these protests for the region?
I think this movement has actually transcended the Middle East. I think women's rights, be it whether you're an American woman, where your rights to an abortion has been revoked, or whether you're in Afghanistan, whether your rights to education has been revoked, or whether you're an Iranian woman. I think these protests has what it's done is it's beautifully unified women across different generations, across different ethnicities. And it has had a ripple effect. So I don't think this is just a movement for women in Iran. It's a movement for women all over the world, because in one way or another, in different ways, our rights are being taken away from us.
Right. One of the, I think, one of the ways in which the regime is trying to keep a lid on this is and I've been reading more about this, are raids on schools throughout the region, girls' schools, for example. I was just reading in The Guardian a case of a 16-year-old schoolgirl who was beaten along with her classmates when the security forces raided the school and demanded that they sing an anthem to the supreme leader, which they refused to do, and the result was beatings and large arrests. Are you surprised that the courage of these young women to defy these authority figures?
No, I'm not. We always talk about culturally in Iran how powerful Iranian women are, and how we were allowed, for lack of a better word. But at this time around, I think they have reached their peak, from whether you're 70 years old or whether you're 16 years old. But I think the important thing to consider here is that as foreign, if you're listening to this story, as Iranians, we've normalized this behavior. We see this day in, day out. So as this has started to unfold, and many of my counterparts have reached out to me, we've discussed how messed up is it that we really think this sort of behavior is okay or is normal, this sort of treatment of human beings. The government is acting with complete impunity, no accountability. These are people's children. These are people's sisters, wives.
Right. So it's just really hard to see how this ends, but there does appear to be no end in sight to the protests, which is another thing I think is quite striking, that these have spread quickly across the entire country, and they continue. And you do wonder, how far will the regime go to shut them down? We like to end our sessions often here at the Equality Summit with a call to action, something that people in the audience, people watching online, can do to try to make some improvement. What would be your call to action to this audience?
Going back to what we were just saying, accountability. There's a petition that's been launched by Amnesty International that's due to be put forth to the UN to develop an accountability mechanism for the Iranian government and their actions right now. So signing that petition would be one of those things. The other thing is visibility. People are dying every single day in the streets. They go out the house, they don't know if they're coming back, they're getting murdered on the streets, they're getting raped, they're getting kidnapped. Please keep sharing our stories. Please keep covering this. And this really goes out to the wider media, because we really need coverage of this. And for the first time as Iranian women, we actually feel like we're being heard.